for February 27th, 2017. Is there a motion to approve the agenda as distributed by our city clerk, Carla Geyer?
Also move.
Been motioned. Is there a second?
Second.
Council discussion. All in favor signify with yes.
Yes.
Opposed with no. This becomes our agenda. We welcome back to meeting number 4 our guest council person for February, Mr. Ron Mathias. You're getting to be a veteran. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. Public comments on any items that are not on tonight's agenda. Are there any public comments? Okay. Then we move to our study session calendar. Discussion number 1 is our water rate increase. I'm going to turn this over, I think, to our city administrator. I know that for the public, we have been looking at the 2.5% that's part of the inflation increase, with the other 2.5% either being just a part of that regular bill, or maybe if it can be isolated. That was some of the discussion, and as far we kind of came to a moment in time where it's hard to grasp where we're going to go with all that. So in our wisdom, we decided one more Monday night. So maybe you can just bring us up to date with where you're thinking the discussion is and the issues are.
Yes, sir. I guess we've kind of come to where we're trying to get more detail on, the increases, the water fund, sewer fund, kind of where we are. I know it's being proposed that we have a 5% increase over the next 2 years. And, I put together some scenarios that, once you get out there 8, 10, 12, 20 years, I mean, what are we really accomplishing? I can show you that on paper, and I've got the samples. I don't have them with me because they're not completely finished. The sewer fund gets very airy. There's at least 4 different funds involved in this. They all interconnect, and it gets a little interesting. But if you look at the attached documents, it all really starts with the original pages from the budget book itself when you get into the water fund. And so somewhat I want tonight as well, as we talk through this, is to confirm that I've got the right track basically finished, and I can email this to council hopefully first thing in the morning, because I think it's done. I just don't want to have something out there that's not, in my opinion, accurate or exactly what was being asked for, so we're not having to go through this attire again.
Right.
Because from what I understand, I guess, I don't know, and the council, correct me please if I'm wrong, but is there anyone that disagrees with the projects we have that we have to do them? The water main itself, funding that in a couple of years, or the activated sludge system, the sewer system in the next 4 years, roughly, or 5. I mean, is that fair to say? Are we in agreement these are needed projects?
I didn't hear that on the table, is it? I think we've agreed that these are must-do, borrow Mr. Lampy's words. Just how we list it, I thought it, well, okay. Any input on this? Okay, so I'm assuming that you can assume, yeah.
Okay, so we're needing to do these projects. And then the other question I have then is we've talked, and I want to, I guess, have some discussion on this too, is are the water and sewer fees the best ways to fund them? Or are we still looking at wanting to fund them with GEO-bond tax, that kind of thing? I guess I'd like to have some input on what is that position by council as well. Are we looking at doing it through water, sewer, not GEO?
Again, I think we're kind of there, but I'd like to open that up for discussion one more time, just to make sure that I think you're looking for the security of knowing how to proceed, and that this won't end up being something that later is checkmated. Any thoughts?
I guess my understanding, based on statutes, is that we're supposed to put budgets together around enterprises. I mean, you've got your essential things like fire and police, those type of things that come out of property tax. But then, for as long as I've been around, it's always been around enterprises, and the enterprises try to pay for themselves through fees and those type of things. So
And for Ron's sake, he wants to make sure you speak right into the mic so he can hear. Go ahead.
I guess, my understanding is we're headed the correct way, or we're doing what has traditionally been done, and I have never seen a strong argument not to do it that way, I guess, so.
That's what I'm asking. I want to make sure that we're on the same page, that we are going to pay for the bonds that are issued. The payments will come from water fees, sewer fees. I mean, is that where we're at as a group?
Right.
And maintaining the balance that we need for emergency, make sure we keep that bond balance.
Yeah, that 35 to 50%. That's been kind of the challenge. We don't want to go too much. You don't want to go too low, and yet you want to maintain. And that's where it's been more of a challenge to try to work through this, especially in the sewer side, because it is such a large amount of money we're talking. And we want to be aggressive in how we pay it back, 10, 11 years. But do you do 15? Do we do 20? I don't like 20-year bonds, but it comes down to how much do you want to have the fees be for it as well. Now, sewer is a little easier because we're a few more years away, but again, you have more opportunity then to build up to that point once you get to deciding you're going to do the fees. You have almost 4 years to build to lessen that effect, or you can choose to not do that until it comes due to look at that bond itself, and that's kind of a policy decision that council should look at. But for us, I'm working forward with this, and I went through and talked to Mike about some of the water fees we have and the sewer fees and what we have in here currently. That's kind of, I guess, where we're at. And so I'm going under the assumption that we're doing them in the best ways through enterprise funds, water fees, sewer fees. And we're going to try and maintain our fund balances as we go through and keep those intact. So if you look at the first page, the water fund, and again, this was gone through once already for budget, but I want to show you this is where it kind of start from. When you go down to the transfer section in fiscal 18-19, you'll see a $165,000 payment put in there. And it says for the Bremer Avenue water main debt payment. And that's kind of the estimate we have in there for approximately 10-year bond, maybe 11, depending on how it all unfolds. But that's where it starts. And so as I look through this, my understanding, and again, you got to correct me, counsel, if I'm wrong, is that you want to see, I don't know if everyone wants to see this or not, but you want to see this out another 10 years, what the estimates are to look like until the bond falls off. I mean, is that what I'm been preparing here? Because that's what I've been going forward with and have a shell of that prepared. But I want to make sure that we're doing the right thing here before we put a whole lot more time into this, because we try to make it as accurate as possible. So I guess I'm looking for any kind of discussion, because it's 10 years on the water and it's probably a good 15 on the sewer. And that's what I've tried to build.
Mm-hmm. Just a question from me. Is there value in, is there value in projecting out like that? What would the value be? Maybe the better question.
I think it's very hard to project out that far. I mean, you have a lot of assumption, you have a lot of broad estimates of what do you think it's going to be, what are the fees going to be. Obviously, we know our existing debt, the new debt we're talking about, but our revenues is what we're looking at, whether it's a 5% increase, a 2%, whatever that may be. And again, you can mess with that scenario all you want, and that's the whole point of it. Is I may have my version of it, may not be what council determines they want to see. And that's where I guess I struggle with this throughout the week with all the other things that we got to deal with after last meeting. And so, again, I have a framework there, and it's basically done on the water side. Sewer still got a little bit to do because that's, like I said, a little nastier. But that's what I'm trying to go out is another 10 years from when that first bond payment would be issued in fiscal 19, and then try to show what the fund balance would be as we move out by percentage, and try to keep the fees flat, I guess, after the first 2 years of 5% increases. And so I guess that's what I'm wanting, is a little more direction. Am I heading the right path? Is that what we're wanting? Or is this, I mean, what do we want here?
So what's hard? Or what, maybe I'm missing the projecting 10 years out. What's the hard part about that?
It's not hard, but is it worthwhile?
Okay.
Is that what you're wanting to see, is another decade out of estimates of what I think it could look like? Because, again, they're all estimates. Obviously, it's everything from this year forward are estimates, including the 3 years, which are in a lot more detail on your budget sheets. you see the bond starting, as I said, the $165,000 payment, principal interest, that kind of thing. But how far out do we want to go? Because I can go 10 years, 11 years. I've got 11 now, so you see the last payment dropping off of the $165,000. That's about the average of what we're looking at. Again, on the sewer, it's 15 or maybe even 20, and we're getting out to 2036 at that time. And the bond drops off, or we have to do 2 years of funding potentially because it is such a sizable, $8-9 million issue. So I just don't want to throw so much at you if this is what you're wanting.
Well, especially when part of borrowing from past conversations, we don't want to overload on you and Jennifer on this, because it has to have some value before we want to do that.
Sure.
And there's so much variable. I just want to make sure where the council's coming from here.
Because what I've got is I took the water fund, and you see a 5% increase in 17-18, 18-19, which is what we're asking for. But there's also 5% in 19-20. And that's where the final year is on the 3-year, chart when you look at that. And then at that point forward, I want another 7 years without the increase to see what that looks like. And depending on the fund balance, that's kind of what I've got. And so I'm asking, is that what you want the council to see?
Well, talk a little bit maybe about, I know it's review, and you've talked about it before, but talk a little bit about why you projected it out this way and why you recommended what you did, maybe just in summary fashion. I know some of us heard that, maybe others didn't, and then we can, just if you can summarize that briefly.
Sure. I thought the last discussion was given direction to show as far as the bond payments were until they fell off. That's what I guess I took away from that, at least in the secondary part of the conversation. I know the first part was, do we want to show a separate line on the bill breaking out 2.5 or 2.5, or do we want a flat fee? And maybe this is all secondary to that. Maybe that's the underlying major question at hand is, do we want to do that? And talking to Jennifer, I think we can do that. We can add a line to the bill, I believe, and probably populate it with the percentages or the dollar amounts related to that percentage. I know it was brought up that for transparency's sake that we'd want to show that, and then in 10 years that 2.5 would fall off. And that's what led into this conversation, wanting to see it on a spreadsheet, that we would have it falling off. And that's where I guess I wanted to make sure we're on the right path before I put even more time into it, especially the sewer side, because 10 years isn't that bad. We've got the first 2 here or so. You take it out 10, but once we get that far out, is it really valuable to you as a council? And I guess that's my ultimate question.
No, I like being able to see this, and this is part of what it kind of tells me is for paying off this bond for the water. It's about a little over 1.9 million that we have to have.
About 1.6 we're estimating. I think, correct, Mike? 1.6 on the water main.
165 revenue and then 287 in interest. I was adding the interest in with that.
Yeah, the 165 that I had when you look at this. When you look at the sheet that Mike prepared and it sent out, it was 164,000, 64, 65, 66. I average 165 total across the board, just to give us an even number to go across.
Per year, that's what we need.
Yes. So
okay.
Yes, per year.
So we knew, and I guess I was the one that brought up the idea of maybe splitting it out just to, to kind of show that this is what this is paying for, and being able to have that understand why, or have people understand why the rate went up that it did, and also permit the ability to actually pull that off. And then at the end of the 10 years on this decide, do we still need, we've got probably those 2.5% a year, but then we need that additional surcharge or fee or split or however you want to say it on there, or can that be pulled back? And so I guess I was more on that front end of it, looking at it from, I don't disagree that we need the money and we need to pay for the project. If the project's a good project and it's the proper time to do this. Same thing with the sewer, and even, it would have been nice had we had a little more notice exactly of when we would be able to dig into Bremer Avenue, that we could have started building this up a little bit earlier too.
Sure.
Like we can do with the sewer. So to me, it's not necessarily a question of raising the funds for it. It's how does it how do we communicate that to the public? And in some cases, maybe reassure them that we're just not tacking up an increase that's going to be perpetual increase for way off into the future, that it's paying for this project, and once this project is
Right.
done, we'll return to our normal operations and normal balance, trying to maintain that.
So if we have another project, let's say in 5 years, we have a water main goes down, say it's a sizable one, and we have to go and get funding for that, do we want another line for that as well? In that percentage? Or, I mean, how far do we take this? And we already have a couple of bonds out there now. Do we want to go back and try and break them out also? I mean, I'm just wanting to know, where do we
Yeah.
really go with this?
Yeah, that's
How far
good
do we
question.
go?
That's for us to ponder. Wisdom of the council, David?
Yeah, I guess what I did, maybe I can show this, but I was just curious. So if you take your projections out, you've got the budget you've got out till 2020. So what I did was basically I took that and charted the individual portions of that out till the debt payment that you've got, to see as those add up and they increase over time, where does the revenue have to be to make sure that it's on top of that? And maybe I could show this or send it out. My only question is if there's a way that, because what I'm seeing is the debt's being paid off, the other expenses are coming up to the point where they almost meet. So in the future, we would have to continually raise our revenue to accommodate the increased expenses.
Wouldn't that be just intuitively logical if you're thinking out 20 years?
But that means we've got, that's saying that, unfortunately, and that'd be something to go through. That would mean that, our, today our personnel costs are $340,000. If you go out, that means our personnel costs are over $500,000 with the same people. I'm assuming that wouldn't happen. So what I did was built into this so you could adjust those percentages over time. And that's just what I was trying to do to make sure that as expenses increased or however they went, because we've got to figure capital purchases in there as well. I guess one thing I found with the water revenue, it looks like it just goes up 5%. I'm assuming there'd be growth as well.
That's possible, yes. New providers, new people coming on.
That could almost, maybe accommodate that and maybe reduce some of that increase. Over time, we could basically increase our revenue by taking advantage of the growth as opposed to raising the rates. That's kind of what I was. So what I was, like I said, I can send this out, but I just wanted to make sure that our revenue line, as we stack everything up, our revenue line was above everything else.
Yeah, please do send it out.
Yeah, right, or I can show it quick or something, but.
Sure.
We can put it on the projector, that'd be great.
Yeah, and this kind of give you insight into my crazy mind, what I was trying to look at.
If it looks like this.
You want to just put a screen on the overhead?
I think it'll jump around for you. Yeah, so that's, so basically what I did was I took the water, that's what everybody has in their budget book, if you can see that. And then the debt that they sent out today. I'm going to see it goes.
Microphone, please.
What's that? Oh, sorry. So I basically took the water, the water budget that we've got, and then the debt budget that you guys sent out, and made a summary. So I just pulled the pieces together. You can see his total revenue, then broke it out. And this is basically copied it so I could chart it easier. Took the total revenue. You got personnel costs, the buckets, and then service and commodities. So basically charted that across. And so what I was interested, I guess I can't point here, but what I was interested, so these are basically all the expenses that pile up. So these are additive. So you've got, see the personnel costs, service and commodities was a bucket, and then capital expenditures, and then debt. So you can see is like what you were showing there in your chart. Hopefully this looks the same, but the debt, will go up and then it goes down, and it goes down as it's being paid off. So the line here is basically the revenue line. So that's what I was trying to explain. So we want to make sure. So the challenge though is in between there is basically excess revenue.
So what assumptions did you use for all of the revenues and expenses?
No, this is just from the information that we've got.
But to project it out, what revenues, what assumptions did you use?
It was what we got, and then beyond. So we were talking about 5 and 5, and then go back to 2.5. So this is just 2.5 every year. And I guess so. Here, so I basically created another spreadsheet or another part of that, so we can basically factor in growth, inflation, rate increases, and then create another chart. And that was just so I can play around with it to look.
And what's your conclusion?
So this is basically what we're looking at today. It's another way to look at as everything adds up. But I guess what I was trying to find here is if there's a way that we could somehow accommodate, because you can see there, these are basically capital purchases in the near term. If we can accommodate those in a different way, there's almost a way that we could almost not raise rates to the extent that we were talking about today. Is just trying to be creative.
If I understand.
Well, I'm looking at that space where it's, where the debt's falling off and the revenues are still coming in. That is our future development, future projects space that we need.
Sure.
That's
That's one thing I couldn't find in the budget where that fund balance is accumulated. That would be another. But we don't. I'm assuming that we don't need to be accumulating millions of dollars. So there's basically a running total on the bottom here of what those accumulations are. It grows every. These are not additive. That's just the net every year. So those would be adding, and that's significant. And I don't know what like you talked about 50%. I guess I missed what the goal is to add. So we could show that as well. So that's basically what I was, like I said in my mind, how I was doing that. And what I would try to do basically is figure out a way, if there's a way to be creative, either somehow, the services and commodities is a significant part of that. And if there's a way that, I don't know, I'm assuming that doesn't just go up every year. And also...
Why would you assume that?
I would assume that not every expense just continues to go up every year. At some point we need to find efficiencies to help control costs.
Well, I agree with that, but have you experienced much of that? In any part of your personal, professional life?
Yes, very definitely. So this was one of the things that isn't taken into consideration here is basically growth. If we and I don't know what that number would be. What level of growth we want to have would add to that line, and realistically allow us to decrease our increased cost. So
really, once you increase your increase your revenue to a point where you've got enough to cover the bond payment, you shouldn't have to raise it anymore because the bond payment's not going to increase over time.
Flatten it out. Yeah, and that's what I started doing. And that's what I started doing with. So I created another graph here where I can basically start moving things around here, play with the growth. If you add a couple % growth, which we would really kind of want, that's so that in effect could take away the requirement for an increase.
And really, your growth could offset some of your increase in your commodity prices, or
yeah. Yep.
I just want to make sure I understand your graph there. The little green sliver is...
And that was, so that's capital purchases. So if you look at the budgets in the budget, but in the summary, so there's 61,000 in this year, then there's 108 and 61 and then 21. So what I was doing is I assume there'll be capital purchases every year. Going forward, we'll have to replace, so that would add into this as well. you see there's a sliver here, which makes it negative, but over time, we would probably want to be capitalizing or amortizing those and ensuring that's in there too. So
If I'm understanding it, the purple then is the debt.
that's the debt. Yeah, and that.
So are you taking into account in your modeling that it looks like every 3 to 4 years we do about $1.25 million, $1.8 million worth of additional infrastructure work?
No, this is just from what they sent us. You know, this spreadsheet here where. And James has it in his handout there.
Part of what they sent us. We did a 2008 project that we're going to pay off next year.
Yeah.
We did a 2012 project that was 1.2 million.
Yeah, you can see that where it's going, then it pays off. Yep.
So
Yeah, it should match exactly what you've got there. It's just
So is there
what
an
I'm trying to
opportunity to pay
suggest
that,
is
pay the new
after,
debt up sooner?
I didn't
Is
mess
that-
with it. I just
Is that
showed
possible?
Yeah, it's just increase in fees if you
Yeah.
What I'm-
maintain what you have. I
What I'm
mean,
saying, you've got debt dropping off rather than, not pay that extra amount. We're already used to paying that amount of debt, put that towards a new bond.
yeah, if you want to keep the fees high, or I should say, because if
Yeah.
you,
Well,
like
that's
Dave
what
was
you're,
saying, if
that's
you
what you're
go,
proposing, is to keep the fees high. But if you raise them up to a certain level and then level it off, you still have debt dropping off that you can use that same money to pay off the new bond.
I understand that. And in fact, when we add the bond in, we slip it in where the 2008A falls off. That's where the new one starts, and then it stair-steps off. And as you go, gradually, you gain fund balance back that you're losing as you're cycling through this. Because the spreadsheet that I did, and it's very similar to what Dave did, I just didn't do the charts with it, but I factored in fund balance, and I show the rate going flat in fiscal 2021 with the 3.5% increases. If you go to a flat rate, then going forward, you don't have that gap in there unless you start looking at additional debt projects. And you factor in the amount of equipment. It's about 60,000 in the last 5-6 years on average. So what I did going forward, we factored the debt in. I just want to make sure we're going on the same page, and it looks like I am.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah. And then this is crazy. I might get crucified for this, but if we so this looks, if we would basically take the increase out, we're negative for a couple of years, but it's really less than a subsidy to the airport. And that's a decision. I mean, it's $70,000 or so we'd be negative, and I don't know. I don't know what our fund balance is, but there's a lot of different things that we can do to. Maybe we can push capital purchases off. I'm not making.
So you're
any-
basically saying the way to, what you're recommending in a way, Dave, is not to do some things for a while.
But I wasn't recommending. I was just. This is a way to kind of show different scenarios.
Yep, I get that, but I'm
Yeah.
trying to get the takeaway. I'm trying to understand what it is your message is, and I think your message is that we probably should kind of stand still for a while in order to decrease rates.
I guess I was just looking for ways to stay within our rate balance or our rate schedule. And I guess I wanted to see as we add the expenses to the debt and are basically the accommodations that we have to make within our current revenue. And we didn't factor any growth in that. I was curious to see kind of where that stood. So.
yeah, 'cause growth is so hard to know when you look at apartment complexes or you look at single-family homes, or how do you really factor in how many
Yeah.
meters are coming in, how much revenue is it going to bring? That's a hard one to put in. And that's where you get to where, and you know as well as that, you can make this say whatever you want to say. And that's the hard part. You take a straight, we're not going to assume any growth. It's not the best attitude to have, but what if? That's worst case, there's no growth. And you look forward, then yeah, like I said, I have the 5% increases, and then it goes flat to zero for the next 7-8 years. On paper, it seems to work. I still got to look at the fund balance a little closer, but we try to maintain a 35 to 50% ratio of fund balance to expenditures. You go to your bond companies, they want to see that. Your general fund, usually 25%, because there's a fourth of the year you don't have taxes coming in. They want to make sure you have fund balance enough to cover it. That's what you kind of see here. And if you look at the bottom of the waterfront page, it does say unassigned balance target 35 to 50%. And so that's what I factor in, is a minimum of 35%, which you hate to cut to the bare minimum, but if that's what we do, it's what we do. And there are a number of years where we get negative, we don't have that 35% that they do really want to kind of see. And then it climbs and it fluctuates, and you see year to year, as you look at the net fund operations, we're positive for a couple of years, we're negative for a couple of years, actually the next 4 or 5, but then it becomes positive again. It all fluctuates year to year. So, yeah, that's what I have as well, what Dave presented, and I factored in the fund balance. We've looked at the flat rate, because that's what I was doing, manipulating a lot of that today, because the water, I'll tell you, is a lot easier. I don't know if you've dug into the sewer or not, but that's a little bit messier. There's 4 different funds that link into that. That's not as pleasant to try and figure out. Instead of talking 15 or 20 years. The framework is there. It works the same. I just don't have it set to where I like it because, again, it looks real ugly. But I can have that. I can have it to you tomorrow morning. I'm almost certain of it if this is worthwhile for council to look at. And that's I guess, my question is this what we're wanting to see? What David just presented and what I have in front of me, is that what we're after to look at? To decide, I'm not sure. Do you do the 5%? Do you not? And I guess the thing that made me pause the most is, every year, obviously, council has a decision on if you set the rates higher or lower. You could vote it down and set it at negative 5%. You could set it at 10 increase, at 0. You have that ability to do that every single year. Even if we were to lock in 3-year rates, if something changes, you can go back and undo that and put in the rates correctly. So, even if we put the percentage on the bill, as we're talking about, we split it out. I'll guarantee we're going to get calls that we're double billing people. They're going to see the same amounts, and we'll get that for a little while until they understand what is happening with that. A lot of cities go to a straight flat fee. I know we found that Reedland's done that. LaPorte City, I used to live in, did that. Straight flat fee, $2, $3 a month for 10 years. You see that. Our water would be $3 to $4 a month for the next 10 years, but then you're paying the same as a business or a college or high school. You're paying the same rates as everyone else. That's maybe not the most efficient way to do it. I think smaller towns can do that because they don't have a lot of industry that draws a lot of usage. Everybody's fairly flat, fairly the same, except for maybe a couple places. So I guess that's what I'm getting at is we can certainly change the bill. We can make that happen. We can add a line. Does that benefit or not? I guess that's the question. Is that what we want to do going forward? I feel like I'm talking in a circle in a sense because the sewer discussion is the same thing as what we just saw here. It's the exact same thing. What do we want to do with that? And so I guess that's my ultimate question. I'll finally get to it instead of continuing to talk to you. But what do we want to do with the bill? And is this worthwhile for all of you to see and look at? Is this what makes your decision possible or not? That's it.
Did you find out if you can put it on the bill? Is that a?
I believe so.
Oh, that's not a.
Can we put it on the bill? Can we add the line?
Sure. Absolutely.
I wonder, and I think that was Wes, but I wonder if that would help us kind of keep our eye on it or give people, I see from a marketing standpoint that it gives people an eye on this is what it's going for. This is my water bill looks a little bit higher. Why is that? Well, it's going to Bremer Avenue. And, it's interesting. People asked if we should do it on taxes and our bills, and we don't need to go through that again, but I was just curious on my own. So in my own personal, it would make my water bill go up, and if I didn't use any water in this past year, I probably tried not to, but I think it'd make my water bill go up about $70 to do this, but it would make my taxes go up about $60, which is interesting.
See the figures. I guess I'm not sure how that would work. So
yeah. So, but I was interested to see the difference, and I don't know if you have that. I probably shouldn't say that a lot. I don't want people to start making assumptions on one or the other, but
the difference, I guess. What difference in like?
I basically added 50 cents to the levy to cover $400,000 debt.
Okay.
Yeah. So
where's the 400,000 come from? What debt number is that?
The debt balance from your spreadsheet, the annual debt payment.
Oh, for all the debt that we have out there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, for water. So
For just the water, so paying that out of general fund.
yeah, paying on general fund.
Property tax
Yep.
as opposed to the.
Plus, it's tax deductible where water rates aren't. So
It'll be probably closer to $1 because we run about $100,000 payments, about a quarter. Because $1 million on a 10-year bond is about a quarter increase. So it'd be probably closer to $1 if it's $400,000 in payments. Okay. So that may change some of what you're looking at. But and I think individually you may find that to be the case in a sense. I know from a citywide policy, when we look at, as we've talked many times, who pays taxes and who doesn't. Yeah. In theory, it's where you want to hit the largest users of it that are not currently paying taxes and recite the list again. So that's, I guess, what I'm looking at is this the right way to go? And that's why I asked the initial question, is this how we should proceed with this particular project? And so I guess I go back to, where do we want to move forward with it then? Obviously, there's no voting tonight.
And maybe, I mean, you could maybe do this or tell me whether this would be easier, make more sense. I don't know, because again, this was just thought of as a way of some transparency and some being able to do some of that. And you mentioned, well, do we do this for other projects? So maybe we have that line on the bill that this is the project line, and so this portion of your taxes are being used to pay for.
Oh, I see where you're at.
These
whatever projects.
These
we
projects, and so if we have a new project, it goes on there, and then we can adjust that down or up each year. I don't know if that's more cumbersome that we have a regular rate and then we have a project rate, and if it.
I don't know.
Tim, I think the more we talk about it, I mean, at first it sounded like a halfway decent idea to me, but the more we talk about it, I think the more confusing it is, especially if we're talking about which other projects out for 10 years. I think we become less transparent. I mean, in some ways, from year to year, then you see sort of, yes, I mean, as long as we're transparent in what we're funding through the increase, I mean, in our discussions here and our actions here, then you see a percentage increase or decrease or flat or whatever it is. And I mean, to me, I think that's in a way more transparent. If it were only for 2 or 3 years, where there was a clearly defined project and we know which projects we're identifying clearly, and it's only a couple of years, that's one thing. But if we're talking about any number of projects and as much as 10 years. I think then people getting their bills or new people coming to the community and seeing that on there, and they're at the 5-year mark and they don't even know what that what that reference is. I think in a lot of ways it could be more confusing or less transparent than just monitoring what the actual increase is from increase or decrease or whatever it ends up being from year to year.
Well, and it will change every year, just so you know, the 2.5%, if that's what you decide to break out as, again, we grow or we don't, and we have an increase unforeseen or things, it will fluctuate every year. So it is going to be a change. It's not a flat fee, as people would maybe expect this conversation to say, well, okay, I'm going to see $10 for the next 5 years or 10 years. That's not the way it will work. It will fluctuate. So that we're all clear. That's what's going to happen as a percentage.
As you said, we could do a flat.
Sure.
$4, but
that's the simplest, easiest thing to do.
You're paying $4, I'm paying $4, Wartburg's paying $4. People might look at that and go, water usage might be a little bit of that. Yeah.
And that's why I was interested to get all the water usage, because there's probably and I found this in the electric rates too, there's a wide variation of users, so you got, but then on the other hand, you've got heavy users paying for more than Bremer Avenue than light users, which probably doesn't make sense.
Right. Right. And so the percentage is probably your easiest way to do that on your usage, so to speak,
so that's why
versus the flat fee.
You could always assess the downtown businesses for it.
Oh, Mike, don't even say something like that.
Okay, are we
Versus the sidewalk and
For the public, that was a lighter moment.
Ooh, look at the time there. Holy cow, are we about done?
Tell you what, let's have a toll bridge.
Well, you want to put the
Just like like
Dave.
Illinois.
pay
That's-
for it.
Yeah, I like where your head's at
User
there.
fee, yeah.
Remember, Dave Resnick said that. Toll bridge.
For a toll, let's tax the people that use it. Use the
Right,
street, right?
I like it. Bremer Avenue toll.
So we're talking about the bill. We're kind of
Yeah.
evolving here a little bit.
Where are we at? Do we want to split it out?
We could put the collection house over here by the chocolate factory, so we would have a Nestle toll house.
That's it. That's where I can't do that.
I'm writing that down.
It sounds like
Yeah, that's a good
working
one to
towards
write down.
recess, but we're not. Dan, thought on this, and then Mike?
I mean, I certainly understand the concept, the goal here, but as I look, it's great we're projecting out, but past history, I think, needs to play in there, and we're always, as I mentioned before, historically, there's always 2 or 3 projects out there. So the debt service, to me, is more of a rolling debt service that the question, well, maybe Nestle shouldn't be paying for the Bremer Avenue. Well, they help pay for the 2008 Southeast extension just like everybody else. So how do you start to divide out who should, who shouldn't? They're all users of the system. The system has to stay healthy and service everybody on it. So if you split those costs across everybody, I think in the long run, everybody pays less. So to me, trying to split it out on the bill is going to get very cumbersome, very hard to explain. The few people that have asked me about the 5%, I said, historically we see 2.5%. We're just adding another 2.5%. It's easy for me to explain it to people. The deeper thing, or the other side of this, is we continually have this conversation where costs are too high. We see them graphically. We're told we need to do something, but when the question's asked, what should we do? Nobody brings forward any suggestions. So I think at some point we have to say, yeah, it is what it is, and if you've got an idea on how to lessen it, bring it forward, but let's stop continually talking about it's what it is. It's always going to be what it is. It's only if we change it. So what are the changes that somebody has in mind to do?
I guess from my perspective, I wouldn't suggest what the changes would be. I would just bring them to light. I mean, we've had this conversation about micromanaging in the past. I mean, I don't want to get into, but it does concern me when I saw that when you add up all the expenses over time and continue to grow at the current rate, and as our debt pays off, we can't pile that debt on again without raising the rates significantly more. And that's even showing that our rates have been growing 2.5% every year, compounding. So that should concern all of us that our expenses need to stop continuing to go up at the rate they do. Otherwise, it'll get kind of scary going forward. But
Okay. Mike?
I'm sitting here wondering if there'd be a simpler way to go at this and just put a line on your invoice and say your rates are higher because of the Bremer Avenue project. The project ends in this particular year, and maybe you don't even get into numbers or percentages. But I really don't know if that's a good idea. I'm just playing with it.
personally, I kind of like, maybe not to counter what you said, Edie, but if somebody comes to town, if I'm looking at utility rates and maybe I'm thinking the water rates are higher or maybe they're not, but if I think they're higher and I see that addition on there that it's actually for Bremer Avenue and I see how nice Bremer Avenue is and then I was like, well, okay, that's great. Our base rate would be this, but this is a little bit of an additive to pay for Bremer Avenue. I guess I like that. And I guess I've seen that in other utility bills where they show, there's different additives for different things. And that was just
transmission charges for like electric.
Yeah.
Transmission, it could be infrastructure. You could call it whatever made sense.
It almost, it almost gives you, it's like I got a piece of that. I'm proud that I'm paying that little extra. Or people probably think I'm nuts for saying that, but at least you can put your finger on it. And you know what you're paying for, as opposed to. And that was just kind of my perspective. That.
Yeah, I think if that were clear, I mean, my concern is it'll get murky in a hurry. But
yeah.
So,
And if it's a lot of. I'm assuming it's not manual. It's just part of the system, maybe.
We just have to set it up, I would hope. And
Play. Yeah.
Yes, when the rates change at the beginning of the year, each fiscal year, it's changed then.
Yeah.
So, Mike, back before we move to Tim here, you're saying what you want? How should the bill read?
Well, my thought was if you just put a line on the invoice that says your rates are higher for the next 2 years because we're doing this Bremer Avenue project, and don't get into.
I don't think we have that much room, Mike.
Okay.
You know,
It was a thought.
I'm going to, just offer something different up. I agree with that communication. I just wonder whether the bill is the best place to put it. You know, there are newspaper articles, there are our publicized meetings, there are communications with our constituents. There's the city, the newsletter. You know,
newsletter would probably be
I think the explanation and the transparency that way is good. I'm just not sure the bill is the place for it
You
myself.
get a newsletter that gets put in with your utility bill.
Yep.
I mean, you can do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be good.
Okay, Tim?
Yeah, and again, I'll go back to, I was just trying to think outside the box a little bit and come up with a way. My concern that people had voiced to me was the compounding, that it would just kind of, we add this project on and then that never really goes away because we'll just keep adding on top of that eventually. And if there was a way to separate that out, that it could drop off but it has to get paid one way or the other. So it's just a matter of how we go about showing.
And that was the initial conversation that we had, and I know Dan brought that up initially, is that, you know, after we have our 2 years of increases, do we automatically go to 2.5 or so? And we talked about that. We wouldn't necessarily do that. Because as you look, the third projection is for 5% in that last year, if needed as well, of the 3-year projection. And after that's where I dropped it to 0, no more increase, and it looks like it does okay for a while. Now, again, that's without assuming various things that are going to pop up. But best guess, it does look possible. And that's where I go back to, you as a council have that ability to do that every single year. Even if you lock something in for 2 years, it looks bad or it looks like it's too much or too little, you still have that prerogative to change it. And we go through this every single year, the rates, the water, the balances. That's what we go through. So
Well,
I'm
exactly.
fine with wherever you want to go with this. I just want to.
Last year, we were talking about a 3-year for 2.5%, and we went to 1 year for 2.5%.
That's correct. And we would have made
Now
an
we're at
adjustment.
5% this year, so
Absolutely.
Case in point.
same scenario. If we had done the 3 years last year, we'd probably be looking at it this year, tax
Right.
the other.
Well, and if we cut expenses out of the enterprise fund, we can certainly do that, whether it's wage or whatever it may be, but then we're taxing for it. And that's the balance you have. Where do you want to go with that ability? If you still want to do the service, you still want to provide this or do the fees, et cetera, or have the line items you see for the amounts you see, that's where it comes into play. We're either taxing for it or you have the enterprise fees, the water fees, et cetera, to pay for themselves and take care of it, which is why it's in this fund. But yeah, we can certainly
And I like the
cut those out, but
previous explanation that with the fund, as opposed to property taxes, everybody that uses it actually pays into it versus there are water users that don't pay property taxes. So
quite a few actually. I mean, you look percentage wise, we've got a lot when it comes to nonprofits and
which might be different than a Reedland
yeah, absolutely. I don't think they got a hospital in Reedland or anything like that, but and that's why I think they can do that though. In all seriousness, they have a very broad base of pretty even usage. You don't have a lot of large users in some of those cities because they don't have the industry there necessarily, and it's not slighting them at all. That's just the makeup of where they are. You don't see it as much in a lot of the larger cities. You can see surcharge fees, things like that. But again, it's difficult then to compare larger users, smaller users. Do you try and tier it? There's just a whole lot of ways to slice it. And that's kind of what we're getting at here. So,
David, your wisdom, please.
Yeah, I think I kind of said my piece, so.
Okay.
Well, the thing on Dave's charts too was that there's a bump, you know, and then we have debt falling off. I think there should be an expectation. You know, Dan, you said that, you know, nobody comes forward with ideas. I think that's what we charge staff to do, is try and keep our rates or try to keep our expenses at a minimum. And I think we as a council need to set an expectation of what we'll allow for an increase. And if they cannot make that, then we need to know why, rather than just say, okay, we're going to increase it 2.5% this year, and that's just the way it is. It historically has been 2.5% every year, and I think that that's not sustainable over time, and especially as this debt drops off. If we get the 5% increase in the next 2 years, maybe there's some opportunity with that extra revenue that's just going to generate and growth, that we can keep our rates flat over time with a little aggressive cost reduction and taking advantage of that debt dropping off. And then we still should have some revenue in reserve that we could do future projects with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe if I need to reiterate, I mean, that's what I was showing, that if our expenses continue to follow the trend, basically we'll be at the level that we are today, fully burdened with the debt that we've got, which kind of made me concerned a little bit, unless we continue to raise rates, and I'm not sure we can get by with that.
Which is a good reason. Your earlier conversation, not tonight, but a while back, was that annually this has to be looked at because of the fluctuating numbers, needs, projects, with the goal of never being more than we need to be.
Right.
And
that's
so that every council has an opportunity to. We're now confronted, of course, with Bremer Avenue, but yeah, well, your wisdom is appreciated, Dan. Edie?
I would yield to Dan McKenzie, since Dan just asked Dan McKenzie a question, if you want to respond to that.
I'm not exactly sure the point. I felt that we've been pretty direct with staff, that we expect them to run efficient operations, and I guess on the backside now it seems like we're challenging that they've done that, and I guess I find that a little odd, but
Let's not say that we're challenging.
Yeah,
I didn't challenge.
Yeah,
I think too that this is a time. Today is a time we look forward for next year.
Mm-hmm.
Say, when you bring us a budget next year, and I think we've had that conversation. Is okay. This is our expectation. We want to keep it flat. We don't have an increase, and this is why.
Yeah.
We're looking forward to where we've got debt dropping off. Realize we have more projects, but we've got a 5% increase in the next 2 years that should be able to carry through. As that extra expense from debt service falls off, I think if we maintain and manage our expenses the best we can, I think this is. I mean, it's achievable.
Yeah, I don't see that too far away from me.
yeah, I would
I
agree
see
if that's
using
what we
different
want to do
approaches,
this
but
fall.
come to the
is-
same reality. I think.
And question that we hadn't been that direct this last fall when we started talking budgets. Again, it's just timing and
Edie, do
back and retrofit an idea into a budget that's already almost final. So, just struggling here a little bit.
Edie?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the more detailed issue of the bill, I guess the more we talk about this, the more I'm in favor of just proceeding with a percentage increase rather than breaking it out. I just think that's in some ways clearer and easier to understand, as long as we're doing all of the other communication that I mentioned before and that Tim has pointed out, rightfully so. As far as the increase is concerned, I mean, I feel like we have reviewed this. It's been part of the budget discussion from the beginning. Staff made their presentation about why they think this is the best way to go. There was a clear conversation about reviewing this every year, and also being very careful to review whether this type of increase would need to continue or not, and hopefully not. There was, I think, some clear conversation surrounding that during the budget discussions. I certainly understand wanting to hold expenses in check. I think staff wants to do that. I think we want to do that. I think it's our obligation to do that. I don't particularly see the value of going, in my opinion, out very much more than 5 years. It's always interesting to see, but it has less and less meaning because of the unknowns and because of the assumptions one has to make in that kind of modeling. So, I'm all ears about where we think we can contain expenses. But again, since those did not come up during our budget discussions. I just don't know at this late date whether that holds much value. I feel like we already did that to a certain degree. And if we want to continue those conversations in the future, I'm all for that. I think we haven't talked very much about, in today's discussion, about, what's the future anticipated debt level for the kinds of projects that we might want to be doing in the future. We've projected out, 20 years for expenses. Well, what do we know about projects 20 years down the road? Have we talked about those? I mean, what are those anticipated to be, and what kind of debt will we need for those? So I think all of those conversations are interesting and important, but I think we're at a point now where I'm just ready to move forward on this budget, I guess.
Yeah, and I think that's what Councilman Lampe was saying. The future, this one is pretty well set. You want to respond, Dan, and then we'll move on?
We talk about projects, Mike. I mean, you know the city, the infrastructure probably as well as anybody. Do you see any water projects in the next 5 to 10 years? I mean, realistically, large projects. I mean, other than just adding for growth. And you don't have to answer now, is what I mean.
Let me.
He's thinking, he's processing.
That was the thinking question.
Do you have a chart for that? I don't know.
Got a list probably.
Yeah, maybe to simplify that question is if, I'd be curious, what's our threshold for, I'm always curious, what's our threshold for if we add 100 homes, if we had, whatever manufacturing capacity we would add, what's our infrastructure requirements, or what's that next hurdle?
And how big do we have to grow to
it's like
really invest in infrastructure like that?
It's like maintaining your house. Okay, Bremer Avenue, that might be reshingling the roof. But you're going to have a furnace replacement, water heater. You're going to have other needs and issues that come up in time. The idea that we're done with capital improvement projects forever,
He just wanted to know which ones there might be.
If you want to freeze the budget, that's how you do it. You stop maintaining your system. Okay? Historically, Waverly's been here 150 years. The modern water division, I think, probably came about in the 30s. Okay? That's when they did the West Water Tower by Pizza Hut. That's when they did the addition on there. That's when they started doing the municipal wells. I think there was a big build-out in 1938. It's never stopped. Over the last 20 years, historically, the average has been about 28% of our water department budget goes to pay off debt. As we proceed forward in time, Waverly is fortunate that we've been able to, we really haven't had must-do projects. We have projects that we need to do, and we've been able to coordinate and time those to coincide with like a debt payment coming off. Okay. We've kind of been the model that communities have looked at. Now, there was a period of time, in 1977 we did a great big annexation. In 1980 we started huge build-out. We added the North Water Tower in 1980, the East Water Tower in 88. At some point, when they did the initial infrastructure, we had 4-inch water mains. That isn't sufficient to provide fire protection to the college, to the school system, to the hospital, to the nursing homes. They replaced those and built them out with larger water mains to do the fire protection. Bremer Avenue wasn't one of those. Now, we weren't about to go out and tackle Bremer Avenue on our own and install the water main. This is an opportunity project. We have less control over the timing on that type of a project. But I think we've done very well. And
Could I rephrase the question, Mike?
well, I don't have everyone's attention, so I'm.
Well, no, but let me rephrase the question. What the question was, as you know the city so well, as you look out 2, 3, 4 years, is there any worry projects that
There are
radar?
There are other capital needs. As part of 20th Street would be looping a water main underneath the railroad tracks to connect Bartles with Eisenach. Again, that eliminates dead ends and improves the service and reliability. We also have a dead-end water main on the North Industrial Park. At some point, when there's an opportunity, it'd be great to loop that one. Everything out east of Eastgate, Rolling Hills, everything out that direction's on a dead end. The way to loop it is at the point where there's more development occurring in the Rolling Hills subdivision, there would be a project there at that time. Okay, these are opportunity projects. As development occurs, there will be a city participation to add some infrastructure to address those issues. There will always be those needs going forward. Are we able to address them as opportunity projects so that we can coordinate them and time them and manage our rate structure? I certainly hope so. But there may be instances where we aren't so fortunate.
But that's helpful. Thank you.
So what I was, I guess, just quickly, and I think this is important, and I'm, I guess I'm kind of bound by looking 5 years or beyond for longer-term capital expenditures and planning and capacity planning, which should be. So if I would lump back, did you say 27% of your 27% of So if I lump,
it's been as high as 35, as low as 15.
Yeah. So if I lump that back lump that back into what I showed before, adding it to the debt, so we continue to have projects, and then add some capital purchases because you're going to have to replace trucks or whatever it is. I mean, our rate structure, if everything goes the same and our expenses continue to go up, our rate structure is going to have to continue to increase pretty steadily. So that's what I was.
Yes.
Yeah.
Our revenues will need to steadily increase.
But the solution here is if we have growth, that can go the other way, or if we can find ways to become more efficient.
So
I think that's what
from
Mike's getting at.
Those are the 1-2.
From 1990 to
Growth and
2000,
efficiency.
we're lucky to have growth.
Yeah.
I've showed you the population chart. You look at a lot of other communities in Iowa are 70 counties in Iowa are losing population.
I don't think that's factored into our rate structure, though, is it? Or it's not into our
When
revenue
we
stream?
do our 3-year budget, we try to be conservative. And Jenny, can I have the budget sheet here?
Yeah, and
Just the
maybe
water.
that's why you're just kind of excluding that from the revenue. Just
Okay.
suppose.
What I want to point out here is on the revenue side, these are with 2.5% rate increases. 14-15, our revenues were.
Actually went down 1 year for some reason.
That's right. They went down. That's because we're dealing with a utility that if it's hot and dry, people are going to use more water than when it's wet and rainy. So this is why we have that cash reserve at the bottom. That's why we work off of trends and try to be careful and conservative with our trending and the budgeting that we use.
I think a lot of what Mike's talking about is when you get to the dead ends, it's the growth that will allow that to loop in. You know, when we look at the CUNA building, that's a great opportunity as Bremer's opened up. That then is able to be put in the neighborhood that does need that fire protection, that sized correct water mains. Those are the things that we look at opportunity-wise. As we look forward, because I do have an interest in this as well, water towers. I know we have how many today?
We have 3.
3. When would we need to have another one or decommission one of those to repurpose something like that? Is that kind of what we're getting into those major water issues as well? I mean, how far out does that go or take us?
We're in good shape as far as our wells and towers are concerned. You know, projecting out, we're growing at about 100 people a year.
About 1% roughly.
So from 1990 to 2000, it was 0.5% a year. From 2000 on, it's about 1% annual growth is what we have. So that does help compensate for some, but as you've seen, our revenues can actually dip down if it's a wet, rainy year as opposed to a hot, dry year. There's variability in that. So, you know, we budget year to year. every year we go through this.
But
And
I
we
thi-
look at 1 year at a time. Now, we do project out.
Right. I mean, that's the important thing is I think it's both and. It's not either or. We have an opportunity to change it every year, and we always are asking for some projection out that is reasonable and realistic, where you don't have to make crazy assumptions.
I think that's a very wise statement to end our discussion. I think you have a pretty clear consensus. I thank the council for hammering out somewhat of a
I don't know
consensus.
if I do have a clear consensus. I think
Well,
it's
I
a
thought we
mixture
did.
of.
We're going to take, well, I heard the majority here wanting to just put the 2.5 together, or go with 5. That is probably more clarity.
So not breaking the line out on the bill? Is that what you're saying? Because
Well,
that's what I
unless
want to
we-
know.
That would be my preference, but that's just my preference.
So we don't put the 2.5 on the bill, we just leave it as one
Just
line?
leave it at one.
My preference would be to put it there, but.
Put the
Put
2.5
what
out.
there?
The extra line. Maybe that's how I should phrase it. Do we want an extra
David said
line or do we
to
not?
break it out would be better, and I think, Dan,
I think
you
that-
also agree with that?
Oh, yeah, I think so.
And then
We could figure out what,
The other-
you know, what we're gonna call it.
any of the rest of us didn't feel that, though, so I don't know. So that's why but the consensus is we want 5%. It's just how it goes on the bill. And a little bit of dyed house, but not too bad.
Well, and we can work on the bill going forward too. It's not going out obviously this month, next month. It'll go out when the rates change, July 1st, whatever they end up being.
I'm just going to say, I hope we don't talk about this again. No, I mean, really, and that's not to diminish anybody's opinion, but I think I know where everybody is, and let's just go. I mean, if we can't come to consensus, then let's just go with majority.
Well, I wanted to reach as much consensus, and then you
No,
go with the majority.
I understand, but we've talked about these things, now quite a bit, and I can't imagine there would be new information. If there's new information, I'm always open to hearing it, but.
Okay, but anyway, thank you.
Can I assume sewer conversation, replicate of this, insert sewer versus water, and we're okay? Is that okay?
I think we should say on the sewer is it a replica? And anybody who feels it isn't, let's have a discussion. I want to be thorough. We gathered tonight, and I want to be thorough.
This sounds like it's more proactive than, we've got some ways to, I guess I don't want to say that. We've got some years to.
A little more time.
Yeah.
Yep.
Next year, like we were having this, so.
This is building up the surplus to help offset future.
Yeah, we're looking at
Big
1.6 versus 9. It's a little more.
But all we're doing is covering the engineering cost with these rate increases, okay? You look at what's coming, and you're not looking at 5%, you're looking at like 15% or more for a couple of years in a row.
But from a planning standpoint, we're at least covering it up front as opposed to trying to pay it from the backside or pay it as right at the same time, so.
I understand that's a possibility, and that's where, again, when I talk about the sewer getting ugly, that was the ugly. It does get difficult when you're looking at, again, do you go 10, 15, 20-year bonds? That affects how much you're looking at, the fee issues. Do you do 5% the next 5 years, 7 years? Do you do 2?
So
That's where it gets a little tougher.
That's why you see my 10-year stuff.
Yeah, when I got that 20, it looks a little better. If I go out to 40, I feel really good about it. But 40 is not where I want to be. But I mean, that's how far, it's Excel. You just drag it out, it looks better.
Go to 50,
Yeah,
I'll
but we
be
can't make
But-
decisions
for
now
sure.
for 40
But
years.
so yeah, that's why we're looking at the 2. We're looking at the 5 for now to change where we're heading, and then in 2 years we would look at okay, now what are we looking at? As we get better numbers, we get better figures, we get closer to it. So that's why the pitch was for 5 to hopefully get us turned, and then we don't know how high we'll have to go. But again, it's anywhere from 5, 7. It's not pretty.
I think we need to address that, though, if you're talking, I mean, I can see the spike. Let's not do it now.
No, it's. I mean, but you see that wall.
But I think,
that,
I don't know that we can handle it all now. That's probably something that we need to be planning.
Sure we can. I mean, Dave, other communities are dealing with this. We talk about, I don't want to kind of pick on Reedland here, but they're doubling their rates. Okay?
But the rates are, unfortunately, the rates are cheaper, though.
Not much. Not much.
for Reedland?
For Reedland, no. No,
They're a little smaller than we are. I'm understanding the need, if revenue's what it is. But yeah, you can see it's a wall. I mean, you hit it and it's ugly.
they're to cover their improvements to their treatment system. They're doing the flat fee. It's $31 a month. That's on top of their normal fee. So they're going to be pushing for a customer using 600 cubic feet. Okay, where we're at 38, they're going to be over 70. They're going to be at like 65 or 70 a month.
And hook 'em on. I mean,
So there are many, many communities
12 miles, 13. How far away can we?
around us faced with that. Okay.
My distance gets.
As in November, when WHKS was here, they indicated that there were 85 to 90 communities in the state of Iowa that were in a similar situation that are going to be having to make these major capital improvements. Some of them are going to be hit worse than we are. A lot of it depends on how much industry you have, how many big industries are going to help offset your costs with those.
You can see we're looking at
So-
even a 2-year funding cycle to try and lessen some of this. So it's a chunk, depending on how, we have some time to get ready for it, but it's coming. And that's why, again, the 5% we're looking at for 2 years
Right,
is
so
to start
that- right,
turning this, and then we have to really have a conversation. Okay, now what does it look like?
So it's certainly not an argument to do less than that.
Not from where we're at, just because of the size of the amount of money we're talking, close to $9 million.
Right.
What is the engineering estimate, Mike, roughly? Do you have that?
Well, I think where you typically ballpark, well, here's the comparison. Parkway project is probably similar in cost, and we just entered into an $800,000 contract for engineering design. It's engineering design, so you're probably in that 700 to 800,000 just on the engineering design portion of the project.
Sewer.
For the wastewater treatment facility. Then you have your construction management and observation on top of that.
Okay, so it could be a good million.
So I think they said 1.2 million total was about the engineering cost. So,
And
but-
all of this is a little bit scary, I mean, in the sense that we know we have to deal with it. But I think, to my mind, it reinforces the recommendations we have before us. And I guess I would also say, just on the positive side, we probably wouldn't have some of these issues, only we'd have other worse issues if we weren't growing.
Now, we are seeking ways, I think the way this was kind of put together is this shows probably worse than we're going to end up at, but I'd rather start here and see us be able to come down, and that it's not quite as bad as it was first thought. As James indicated, this only uses an 11-year bond payment. And
Probably do a 15.
at least 15, 20, are we able to get on the SRF? Is there going to be any, that's the state assistance, is there any federal assistance on these types of projects? We're going to pursue every avenue possible. Are we able to stagger some of the improvements that are mapped out so that maybe, the big project happens here, but then there's $1 million of additional improvements that are able to be delayed for 2 years without adversely impacting the project. Those are all things that are going to evolve over the next 2 years.
I find the whole conversation tonight very helpful, and I think the questions have been very good, and I think we know where we're going. Staff comments?
No, sir, I think we've had enough tonight.
Council comments? Edie?
None for me.
Dan?
Nope.
David?
No.
Dan? Ron?
This is it.
Is it time? Is this the, okay.
Yeah. Thanks for inviting me into your midst. Thanks for letting me participate. I haven't made much of a contribution, but I can assure you that I've learned a whole lot, and I have increased my respect for this community and its leadership immensely as a result of the experience. I think this is a wonderful idea. I hope and trust that you will continue it and that other residents of Waverly will have the same opportunity that I did. And then let me say a special word of thanks to staff. Staff has been wonderful in helping me understand at least a little bit about what it is that you're dealing with at this time. They took time. They sat down with me. They helped me understand, and it was immensely helpful. And I'm grateful. Thank you.
Thank you for owning the town for 1 month with us.
Could I just add something? I invited Ron this month, and I guess I really didn't realize what I was getting him into, because he actually came to 4 Monday meetings plus a Saturday. And if we had a salary for him, I'd recommend a bonus, but I guess a bonus on top of 0 isn't very much. So I do appreciate the conscientious attendance and effort and input that you made. So thanks for coming.
Thanks. Thank you, Ron, very much. No mayor comments. Motion to adjourn.
Move adjourn.
Second. All in favor signify with yes.
Yes.
Adjourn.